Okay. Apparently, you're not allowed to like a game and also point out its flaws. Or at least, that's what the die-hard fanboys of Baldur's Gate 3 will tell you. I don't want to hate this game, okay? I love RPGs. Here's my top 5 games of all time. Not in any particular order. I was too young to enjoy Baldur's Gate 1, 2 or Icewind Dale back when they came out, but I love Divinity Original Sin 2. So whatever Larian Studios would come up with, I knew it would be good, or at least have potential. If you know Divinity, I don't have to tell you how good it is. If anyone could pull off the cocky, we ship a complete game line, it would be those devs, or so I thought. If you go on their Twitter, they're very busy ignoring complaints people have, valid or not. Welcome to the party, PS5 players. Be sure to buy our game. The first reply is someone asking to fix the sound bug, which I and multiple others also encountered. It happened quite often, mostly during the tutorial. At first I thought it was my earbuds, and luckily simply disconnecting and reinserting them fixed the problem for a while. Obviously it should not be happening at all. I've read people having to restart their console entirely in order to fix it, so I'm guessing it could be worse. Also, I'm thankful for the game displaying correctly at least, which isn't the case for a lot of people. The Larian account system is bugged, meaning you can't cross progress for now. But more important is that every single deluxe edition item is tied to your Larian account. An account creation is broken. Whatever you type, it will say username taken. It took me too long to realize that other people were also having this problem. People also brought up a complaint that I did not yet know why I had it, but skipping your turn is a simple triangle press away, which kept happening on accident. Coming from Divinity, pressing triangle to bring up your spells is a habit, and I've still got that muscle memory leading to so many unnecessary skips. People pointed out that this should be switched to a press and hold, but I think simply allowing us to change buttons around would do wonders. This prompted me to navigate the menus in search for button remapping, which surprisingly is absent. Actually, there's not very many options at all. The camera turns slowly, especially when playing in close view. There's no language options. This gets overlooked in most games, but it's a simple option that goes a long way. Basically, I prefer to play in the original language for dialogues and either French or English for text. Luckily the game only has one language, so changing the console's language will change the text. Meaning if the game had multiple languages, I would be fucked. You could say the Twitter account is just a studio account that posts updates automatically, but I know they read the replies because they took the time to answer this easy question. A very obvious reply, and it points them in a positive light, so... But all of that is far from the most egregious complaint I have. Are you ready for this? You cannot pause the game ever. That's what started all this off, my search for answers. There must be something I missed, I thought. How could they forget such a simple feature? They said we ship a complete game. Keep in mind, this is from the same studio that made Divinity 2, a game where you can pause during a discussion, save, then come back at the same line where you left off. I'm not saying I expect that level of detail, but when I bring up the options menu, I expect the world to stop. I suppose we all know what pause means. Oh, but how wrong I was. What do you mean by pause? The game is turn-based. If you bring up the start menu while in dialogue, the speech continues, but doesn't progress until you make a selection. He means this. The menu overlays the screen in dialogue, the characters keep speaking. The dialogue trees don't progress when no selection is made, but no sane person would say the game is paused here. So if a game is turn-based, it doesn't need pause. You might say I'm oversimplifying in order to make this guy in particular look like a retard, but you'll see a bit later that he isn't the only one with this asinine take. Just stay in combat and never pass your turn. Who needs pause? They might also mean in the overworld, go into the radial menu, select turn-based and then just do nothing. That's not called pause. Imagine if they did that in Dragon Age Inquisition. Yeah, there's no pause, but you can go into tactical view, so who cares? The game came out in 2014 and it let me pause during dialogue. I'm saying that as if it's something revolutionary, but it's been a feature in games for as long as I can remember. Starting a dialogue and then not selecting anything isn't pause, and this idiot knows it. It's not even needed. Just walk away from the screen and see if anything changes when you return. When I press pause, I want the game and the characters to shut the fuck up, to stop moving, for the world to, dare I say it, halt. Until I'm back. How can I see if I missed anything if I've walked away, by the way? Even so, that's not the point. This sentiment is echoed by the game's subreddit, where, as you'd expect, any criticism is downvoted and badly explained away. Even though the most popular mod for the game on PC is one from a guy who made a pause function himself. They're saying the basic function isn't missed. It was probably a conscious choice. Doubt. This one's interesting, listen. So I point out how their previous games had good pause while being essentially the same game. It's true, by the way, and that's not a criticism, but back in the day no one person said, geez, I wish they didn't take the time to add pause in this when I could just stand still. Anyway, here it is. Divinity is a 60 gig game, whereas Baldur Gate 3 is 160 gigs. Things that are new take an insane amount of coding compared to old games. This almost made me laugh out loud. It's 100 gigs on PS5, but still, to make sure, I ask what size has to do with the ability to add a pause button. Because someone has to code that entire 100 to 160 gigs. It's insane to think that they can just add a random feature without crashing a million lines of code. That's just hilarious. The levels of copium on this sub. Imagine if large games didn't have pause. Oh well, it's too hard, guys. We have to go to every single NPC and code him to stop. He might go rogue and crash the game otherwise. I don't know a lot about making games. It is hard, and there will always be new bugs popping up. But I know enough to know that this logic is flawed. Could an aspiring game dev explain how it works? Perhaps you'll let me know. Again, I don't want to hate this game, but the depths some people will sink to in order to defend its flaws, it's ridiculous. There are some positive things to be said about it. Even though the game clearly needed more time in the oven, the way to bring up the radial and character menu, it doesn't work every time. In fact, I had to reload my save thrice in order to get the adaptive triggers to work for this recording. But when you slightly press L2, it will stay there until released. And the menu can be navigated this way. If pressed completely, it remains until hitting the back button. This concept felt pretty novel. Perhaps they're not the first to do it, but this tells me that they did have time to add minute details while ignoring basic features. Features that perhaps weren't advertised, but you still expect their presence to be a given. Oh yeah, that's another defense mechanism. Along with, it was developed for PC initially, so... Actually, I don't know what the logic is behind that one, if there is any. But I point out that their previous game was also developed for PC initially. Well, that's a different game. Okay, so that's still a fair comparison, don't you think? Which was made with a pause option on PC and on console. I'm noticing that the counter arguments are just saying the thing that happened and nothing more. Therefore, they made different decisions. Are they good decisions? Are we allowed to ask for the bare minimum? Apparently not, because they may add it in a future patch. But they also have done a fucking amazing... Wait. They also have done fucking amazing to have published a beautiful and near perfectly functioning game. Come on, man. Even a dev wouldn't talk this way. It's pathetic. The devs aren't going to put extra hours of work into a feature that isn't required or advertised. Okay, so that's convenient. It wasn't advertised, so why even bother with a save system? They didn't say it would be in the game, so it's still beautiful and functioning. You'll have the pleasure of starting all over again each time, just like in the good old PS2 games when you didn't have a memory card. For that authentic retro experience. I'm saying that as a joke, but these waterheads would probably use that as a defense. Show me one AAA game released in the last 5 years that has anywhere near this passion and effort put into the game with no pay to win or pay to play mechanics. I paid 80 euros for Baldur's Gate 3, so let's assume he misspoke and meant microtransactions, because it's a pay to play game. But wait a minute, those are different games. So when it's inconvenient, you can't compare to other games, but when they think it's convenient to them, it's show me one other game. I say thing because people are quick to forget that God of War came out in 2018, a big game, yet somehow they pull off the amazing feat of interrupting the world when pressing options and resuming when pressed again. Red Dead Redemption 2, it takes 111 gigs on my console, that's more than Baldur's Gate 3, yet somehow, when I press this button, the entire world's activity ceases and then continues when I press it once more. The definitive edition of their own game came out the same year, but perhaps that's cheating. I'll just take any excuse to bring this one up because, like it or not, it is relevant. Here's another favorite, Disco Elysium, a CRPG as well. I wonder whether they've even took the time to make Martinez freeze, one might say, when I could just stand there or talk to Kim. It doesn't advance time when you stand still, so why bother? Pathologic 2, something neat happens when you hit escape or open your inventory. Nothing. I know it's an indie game, but if the argument is that small studios don't count because they make better games, that's a sad state of affairs. Even though I agree with that statement for the most part. Here's Doom. That's no indie game. Resident Evil 2 isn't one either. Death Stranding. Long cutscenes, but I can take a break and come back during them without missing anything. Crazy future tech from Kojima here. Control the flow of time with one press of a button. Metro Exodus, The Last of Us Part 2, Ghosts of Tsushima, Final Fantasy Remake. Final Fantasy 7 Remake, that is. All gigantic games. Desperado 3. It's an RTS, yet somehow pressing the main menu button creates some kind of stoppage. Crusader Kings 3, another big favorite of mine. There are a lot of things and decisions happening all at once, all over the map. Crazy to think that they had to set every single one to suspend in the code when I press a certain key. Doom Eternal. Paused if you wanted to. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, Lost Judgment, Resident Evil Village, Forgotten City. But that was made by like 3 people, so they must be at an advantage somehow. God of War Ragnarok, instead of removing features from the previous one, they added to them. Novel concept, I know. A Plague Tale Requiem. I'm guessing it technically qualifies as a AA game. Less money equals more features. Horizon Forbidden West. I might not like the game for what it did to the Killzone franchise. It's painfully generic, but the world is massive, and on top of that, something revolutionary happens when I press this button. The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I don't play on Nintendo, so someone please correct me if I'm wrong. But I can say with almost certainty that despite being a massive world, you can probably pause the game somehow. Can anyone say if it has microtransactions? I'm gonna guess no. Resident Evil 4, Final Fantasy 16, Dead Space, Hogwarts Legacy, you don't even need a special spell to stop time. Amnesia the Bunker, Layers of Fear. Fuck this game, but it qualifies. Dead Island 2, Quake 2, System Shock, Atomic Heart. And I've skipped a large amount of games because either I haven't played them or they're re-releases, so technically they came out before 2018. I've got a bit sidetracked. I knew the guy was wrong the moment he said show me one game, but I didn't realize just how wrong he was, making me fall down this rabbit hole. Anyway, all that still isn't enough for me to give the game a bad score. If you're someone who liked Divinity Original Sin, you'll probably enjoy Baldur's Gate 3, as it's a Let's Complete version of that with different graphics. Any complaint I had with the first remains here, unfortunately. Our character is still a mute in dialogue regardless of having an origin or not. Might be my personal preference, but having your character actually speak gives him so much more presence. For example, years later I still remember my Dragon Age Inquisitor's voice and attitude.
Shit, damn it! We save Ferelden, and they're angry. We save Orlais, and they're angry.
I like this system much better. The voice acting doesn't even have to be amazing. I remember the male and female voice actors being okay and good respectively. When you remain silent though and the other characters react to nothing, it feels a bit awkward at times, certainly off. You would think I'm used to it by now, as most CRPG protagonists are not voiced, but with the increased budget I expected more. Sadly, it seems most of it went into the graphics, who, I must say, look really good. Even when the camera pushes really close to other characters, once the textures have popped in, they look good. But in the long run, apart from Red Dead Redemption, no game is ever remembered solely because it had good graphics. In any case, you'll probably like this one as well. Divinity was good, making Baldur's Gate 3 okay. Not for 80 or even 60 euros though. My final verdict is to wait for the inevitable deep sale, as I give a final score of 6 out of 10, and the Angry Joe badass seal of approval. I'm just kidding, no seals will be given out today, even though I'll probably close this recording and go right back to my human paladin in the game. Thanks for sticking around, but there's nothing else for you to do except for like the video. Nah, I'm not gonna do that. Just come back in a year when I'll probably have one other review.